Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Royer. Welcome to a special program today in which we're talking about the city we all love, and that's the city of Tuscaloosa. Coming up in December, in the middle part of the month, the city will celebrate its 200th anniversary. We have two guests with us today, but we're beginning today with Craig Witherspoon. Craig, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Craig has been a professor here at the University of Alabama since 1999. You're celebrating 20 years. That sounds like a long time until we say the city's celebrating 200 years.
True.
This is significant, and you as a sculptor, as a teacher of sculpting, are very much involved with this, and you can tell us something about a piece of work that another sculptor has done. What have you learned generally about this city as you prepared for this bicentennial, as you talked about the work that you've done and that others have done to celebrate the anniversary? What's been at the front of your mind of what maybe you didn't know about our city before?
Well, at the front of my mind, without question, has been deadlines, and then all the rest.
Yes.
Basically, to back up just a little bit, the way this whole thing started was Caleb O'Connor and I, who's the other artist who worked on this, we were approached by the committee who's been putting this whole thing together and asked to collaborate to create a piece that not only celebrated the 200 years of the past, but looked into the future. And as part of that, they were looking for some type of educational aspect to whatever this thing may be. I generally work more on larger scales of things and environments and things like that. And so I just sort of naturally started thinking about what would be the environment that led up to whatever this moment was of sculpture. And Caleb just sort of naturally went in the direction of thinking of the sculpture itself. So we just sort of worked naturally as a collaboration.
You mentioned Caleb O'Connor, a fine sculptor, and viewers might be familiar with his work. He did the Deontay Wilder statue. We've done stories about that here. He also did the statue of Willie Mays that is outside Regents Field up in Birmingham. And he isn't just a sculptor. He did the artwork in the federal courthouse building here, too. He's a multi-talented gentleman, isn't he?
Yeah, he's one of the rare few who's a phenomenal painter. And then when he got here, we found out he just so happened to be an incredible sculptor as well.
How much information did the committee give you when they came to you and said, we need you to come up with something significant and historic? Did they give you some ideas of what they had in mind, or did they just ask you all to put your heads together and come up with something that would be appropriate for the bicentennial?
No, they basically just put Caleb and I in a room and let us do whatever we
and wouldn't let you out until you came up with something.
Well, yeah,
sort of like that.
And so Caleb and I bounced ideas back and forth. And eventually came up with what the final solution is, and we proposed it, they liked it, and then we've sort of been tweaking it ever since.
And that is revolving around Minerva.
Right.
Is that right? That is the centerpiece of what will be placed down by the river. Just give us an overview of what your original plan was and what people will see when everything is completed.
Well, Caleb's concept of Minerva stemmed, of course, from the University of Alabama seal. And, Minerva being the goddess of wisdom and often was seen or depicted with an owl, hence, sort of looking into the future and wisdom and those types of things. And so he started with a couple different iterations of Minerva and what her pose was and how she was to be displayed, and we went back and forth on that. And just really worked with the committee to really fine-tune it until he finally came up with his final concept.
Minerva also later has been used to represent wars as well, along with poetry and music and other things. So a multi-purpose symbolism for that Roman statue. Is that accurate?
Not a historian, but sure.
Well, we're the only two on the show right now. We can be the historians. How large will the statue that Caleb is doing going to be? How significant?
Well, it's on a base, a stainless steel base, and then which is, I believe, that's 15 feet tall, and then she's another 10, and then the owl's another 5. So it's somewhere those numbers are wrong, but it's around 35 feet tall.
So the committee could say, okay, this is great. Let's have a beautiful sculpture of Minerva, and we'll have a plaque or a reading document of something where people can learn what the statue is about. But your involvement really was to tell the historical significance based on the river that flows right by our city, and that will be part of this display as well. Tell us specifically about the bronze and concrete that you're working with that will be part of the installation.
Well, when I was thinking of the environment that led up to the statue, I started thinking specifically of the history of Tuscaloosa. So just thinking about the river, I went down to the Transportation Museum that's on the river, and I looked through there, and I had not been there before. It's a really nice museum. And I noticed they had basically the history of Tuscaloosa transportation. Mm-hmm. And so stealing from them, I used that as a starting point for identifying significant moments in Tuscaloosa history. Because of the river is what, for transportation and industry and all that sort of a thing, that's really why we grew as a city here. Stemming from the original trails, from the indigenous folks and all that. So I started with the idea of the river as a timeline. Yes. And as you would walk the site, the walkway leading up to the sculpture, you would be walking through a timeline that was walking through the river, basically, or over the river. Mm-hmm. And, all the while along the way discovering different moments in history. So it's titled 200 Years of Tuscaloosa, the walkway, and that leads up to the statue. And the river itself is the copper part of that installation? Is that what will show bronze. The river? Bronze, not copper. It is bronze. It'll be set in concrete. Yes. And it will lead up to the statue. Yes. Have you got a picture in your mind of what that's going to look like? The installation still has to happen, but artists can see things before they're finished, and I assume you can too. I certainly have, but about half of it's already in concrete. Okay. And like I said, we just delivered the rest of the bronze sections yesterday, so we're working with the UA concrete guys right now to get everything embedded and leveled and all that sort of thing. December 13th is going to be the unveiling of the statue and the entire installation? Yes. It's going to be a big day. It is. Is there some nervous apprehension, or are you so far into it now that you go, we're there, we're going to make it just fine? No, we're there. Good. That's it. With deadlines and people who work on deadlines, knowing you're going to make it is a very important part. That is true. Yeah. And the funniest part is on all of these type things is something like a bicentennial. All the people, the many, many people that are involved seem to oftentimes forget that that's the one thing that doesn't change. The deadline is the actual date of the bicentennial. So that's what we... Very good. We're the makers, so we have to deal with that. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about something you've got to have when you're planning a bicentennial long-term planning, and that is a time capsule. We'll talk to the folks behind that and what that's going to be as part of the bicentennial celebration here in Tuscaloosa. We'll take a break and be back in just a moment. Welcome back. We're talking about the 200th anniversary of the city of Tuscaloosa. We continue now with Dr. Bill Bomar. He is in charge of the museums here at the University of Alabama. Right. You've given me permission to call you Bill. Is that fine? Of course. It's good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. And at the end of the program, don't let me forget, I want to remind people of how cool our museums are, and we'll talk about that briefly at the end. I won't forget. I know you won't forget. We want folks to know about that. Tell me about your involvement in this bicentennial celebration, a time capsule that you're putting together. Right. That's an important part and an exciting part of this program. It is. It's exciting. Well, for several years, I've been on the Tuscaloosa Bicentennial Planning Committee. Okay. So I've been involved in planning the whole year-long celebration with a lot of fantastic folks who have just given so much time. And during that process, I was asked to chair a committee to put together a time capsule to be opened in 50 years. When Tuscaloosa is 250 years old. And so we formed a committee and have represented a good cross-section of Tuscaloosa by age and gender and race, and have a great group of people who set out to do that, to assemble a collection of objects that really accomplishes the goal that we set out to, which was to depict what life is like in Tuscaloosa in 2019.
You know, the obvious question, what's in there? Tell me.
What's
Can you
in
tell
there?
me everything? What are some of the things you could share with us that will more than likely be in the capsule?
Well, we actually had some discussion about should we reveal the contents of the time capsule, and so we can reveal some of them, but
Okay.
we don't want to spoil the surprise for
Right.
the people 50 years from now when they have the opening of the capsule. We want there to be some oohs and ahs about what's in it, and if we publish that information now, of course it'll be printed in newspapers.
Sure.
And they'll find those records,
Yeah.
and they'll know what's in it.
Yeah.
So we decided to mostly keep it a secret, but we can reveal some things. So
Give me 2 or 3.
okay, we will have some things that have been very generously donated by some iconic Tuscaloosans. Coach Nick Saban, Deontay Wilder, heavyweight champion of the world. So won't necessarily reveal what those items are, but we have some things from them. Also, during our process, we had a 1 month period where the public could provide input, suggestions as to what to include. And we got some great suggestions. People said you have to have some things representing the T-Town Python.
Of course.
Because in 2019, that was a social media viral phenomenon. And so we do have a T-shirt from the Alcove that has the T-Town Python on it, and some other things that really just depict what things were important to Tuscaloosans in this era.
What I like about your plan the most is that in 50 years, many people who are alive now will be about my age when they open it up. Our college students, for example,
Right.
will be about my age when they open this up. Someone will open that up and say, that Saban guy must have been a pretty good coach.
They must have thought pretty highly of him.
All of this fuss about a snake, what was the deal with that?
Right.
But you'll give a general feel of what Tuscaloosa was like 50 years ago in 2019. This isn't just a mayonnaise jar. This is scientifically designed to last and endure being buried for this long. Tell us about that process.
Right. So actually, we're using a company that produces custom time capsules. So we provided the dimensions that we want, and it's going to be hermetically sealed and the atmosphere removed from the capsule and replaced with argon gas.
Interesting.
The company that does this guarantees their sealing process to last 500 years, but that's kind of hard to test.
Still, but that's the best guarantee I've ever heard on
Right.
anything. 500. Wow.
Right.
Is it a tube? Is it a square? Is it
It's
a
a
box?
rectangular box.
About
and,
how big?
It's going to be 4 feet long by 1.5 feet wide by
So a pretty
12
good
inches
size
tall.
box. Pretty good size.
We've got a nice collection of things to go in it.
I'll bet so. And is that finalized? If someone came up and says, oh, we've got to put this football schedule in there, or you've got to put this lapel pin in there, or is it kind of done and cut off?
When this show airs, it's going to be finalized. So yeah, actually today we are sending the shipment of items to the time capsule company, and then next week I travel there to supervise the arrangement of the objects in the capsule and the sealing of it and all of that. So I will take a few last-minute items with me in my trip next week, but then it's sealed and it can't be opened again.
Is an argon gas what they use, like in the Declaration of Independence? Are many
I'm
things
not sure
that are
about that,
stored?
but I know it has been. I'm not sure about the Declaration.
It's
but
good for that kind of.
It is.
To get the air moisture completely out of it.
That's right.
And so, will there be a specific date on 50 years from December 13th?
Yes,
you believe?
it'll be December 13th, 2069. The plaque, the bronze plaque that will be mounted beside where it's buried, has to be opened. It specifies the date, which actually also falls on a Friday. So this year it falls on a Friday, and it will in 50 years. And you're absolutely right. The young people of today will certainly be around, and we want them all to come out. So my sons are in their early 20s. I've told all 3 of them
Sure.
they have to be there.
Got to be there, absolutely.
I'll be 102.
Well, they'll help you there.
All
they'll,
right.
they'll roll you up, maybe. Wouldn't that be exciting if you did? That's not out of the question.
Who knows?
It's not out of the question. I love history. I majored in history. My high school math teacher recommended I major in history. That tells you something. I know you love history. You love saving things and knowing about things in the past. Help me understand your mindset on the significance of this. It's fun, and it's fun to talk about, but it's significant as well.
It is. I envision that the openers of the time capsule will have these objects. They will want to exhibit them to the public. So I've thought of this in terms of a museum exhibit, that it needs to tell a story like good museum exhibits do. So I charged our committee with that, and the committee did a fantastic job of coming up with the themes that we needed to represent. So we identified 12 themes, like education, recreation, the arts, sports, and found objects that would tell the story of Tuscaloosa across those 12 themes that we identified.
Surely there'll be a newspaper in there. Do you mind me asking about that?
I'll go ahead and reveal which newspaper we put in there.
Okay.
It was actually, this past weekend was the weekend of the Alabama LSU game, and
Yep.
it was really maybe Tuscaloosa's biggest news weekend of the year, with the visit
the
of the president
coming, yeah.
and ESPN Game Day, the top teams in college football playing each other. So that's the one newspaper that we put the entire paper
Everything.
in there.
I think that is significant. I can't imagine a better one. It'd be nice to put in December 13th, 19th, that day, but that's
Right.
impossible
Can't do that.
in preparations of all of that.
Newspapers should be preserved in archives, though, so they'll be around.
They should be, and they can look at any
that
of that.
factored into our thought process some. There were
Yeah.
people kept saying you need to put so-and-so book in there, and we're like, well, they're in libraries.
They can get those
There are a
anytime.
couple of books in there, but we mainly thought of things, we tried to consider, is this the kind of thing that's important that wouldn't be preserved otherwise?
I'm so glad you're doing this, and I can't think of anyone better than you, and along with the committee's guidance and help.
Great
But
committee.
our museum director to be in charge of this capsule is just perfect planning, and I know you've done a wonderful job, and I'm excited about this 50 years from now. It's going to be fun for whoever opens it up. Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate your time. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Dr. Bomar, but also Craig Witherspoon will join us again, and we'll kind of button up the bicentennial celebration. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with Craig Witherspoon on the far side away from me, and Dr. Bill Bomar, the Director of Museums here at the University of Alabama. And Craig is a teacher. Is it the art department that you're under?
Department of Art and Art History.
And you teach a class as well. Is that right?
I
Or
run the
several?
sculpture program.
Is it all hands-on teaching, or do you have classroom teaching as well, where we think of lecturing and that kind of thing? What do you do specifically?
It's all pretty much dirty, sweating, lots of noise. But I also teach seminars and things like that too.
Very
But
good.
my students prefer to see me make stuff rather than speak.
Well, I wouldn't mind hearing you speak, but if I was trying to learn a hands-on skill, I'd much rather have an expert like you show me how to do it than to tell me how to do it. That's the best way to teach, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my classrooms are shops. We've got metal shops, foundries, wood shops, things like that. And my equipment that's what the students learn on. They're running the machines and learning all the techniques and processes and materials.
And Dr. Bomar, Bill, you run all of our museums. We're in the process of doing some stories about the museums that will be airing on our newscast. I sometimes think they're hidden gems here. I know you want everyone to see them.
Absolutely. So we, under the University of Alabama Museums, we have two on-campus museums, the Alabama Museum of Natural History and the Gorgas House Museum, which is the oldest structure on campus. And then off-campus, we operate the Warner Transportation Museum and Moundville Archaeological Park.
Very good. We'll look forward to sharing pictures and words about those places with our viewers as we go along. We talked to you about the time capsule that's going to be buried, and Craig gave us a good preview of Minerva, the statue that is going to be unveiled on December the 13th. What will be the color, the texture? What will it look like the day you put it up? What will it look like 5 years later after it's installed? Give us a kind of a view of that.
Well, like we were chatting about earlier, all statuary and sculpture needs some maintenance if it's outdoors. But we're using pretty high quality metals and pretty high quality materials. So it should look pretty close to where it is on day one as to where it is on, day 500 or whatever you have it.
I mentioned to you earlier that sometimes we see these guys outside in front of the stadium for the coaches' statues and the two players in front of the stadium cleaning them and then melting wax on there. I wasn't aware that's something that's done. That's kind of an old-fashioned traditional way of maintaining them.
You apply your patina with chemicals and things like that to get your colors, and then with those statues, they're sealed exactly like you say with wax, and that's a very traditional way of doing it. We're doing slightly different sealers and finishes, a little bit more, toxic and and more permanent.
And Caleb O'Connor is the actual sculptor on there. As I mentioned earlier in the program, he's done other works that you've seen. Is it finished as we speak, and as this program will air pretty soon? Is it totally finished, or is he finishing it up?
It is finished, and it is actually supposed to be arriving, the statue is supposed to be arriving here in Tuscaloosa. I believe Caleb told me tomorrow.
Tomorrow, and will be hidden away until it's installed, I suppose.
Yeah, they're devising a whole system for how to drape it and unveil it and all that stuff, so luckily I don't have to deal with that.
I asked Bill this earlier when I was talking to him by himself. To you, what is the significance of this bicentennial? You make things that people look at and admire and may not appreciate how many hours you put into it, but what is the significance of the overall bicentennial in your mind?
Well, it's human nature to categorize and quantify things.
Yes.
And we tend to like to celebrate those things for some reason. And so it's a mark, you know, it's a moment in history. We like even numbers apparently, and so it's a moment for people to reflect and look back on where they've been and hopefully keep that in mind as they consider where they're going.
I wasn't born and raised here, Bill, but I find Tuscaloosa to be historically such a fascinating city.
It is.
I recently did stories about a couple of the churches downtown that are older than the city. They celebrated their bicentennial a year and a half ago.
And the city is older than the state
That's
by
right.
1 day.
By one, that's right.
So this year is also the state of Alabama's bicentennial, but the actual birthday of the state is December 12th. Is December 13th, and Tuscaloosa is December 12th.
And Tuscaloosa briefly was the capital city as well. You can still see some of the ruins in there.
I hate to stick my nose in it,
No.
but Tuscaloosa is December 13th. The state is December 14th.
There you go.
You're
If nothing
absolutely right.
else, we're going to be accurate today.
Well, we're going to show up on the right day for the event, which is Tuscaloosa's birthday, which
And-
is December 13th.
And everything that's going on with the bicentennial, you've been involved with the committee for some time. The public is invited to every single thing that has to do with it.
We've had a fantastic year of events that started with the big bicentennial bash at the amphitheater with a fantastic music lineup. There has also been educational events like the Tuscaloosa History Expo, where all of the school children created exhibits in the Bryant Conference Center, and every fourth grader in the Tuscaloosa City Schools came and visited that. And then we've had more educational things like the book reading of the Guy Hubb's book on Tuscaloosa.
Yeah.
We're soon going to have the book discussion on that. And then around the closing of the year, we're going to have maybe some more solemn kind of events, like there's going to be a music event at Moody Music Building with 12 choirs performing that week. And then Friday of that week, December 13th, as Craig says, will be the dedication of the sculpture and the dedication of the time capsule.
I can't be the first one to point out that our 200th anniversary celebration is on Friday the 13th. Is that accurate?
That's
But
correct.
We're not superstitious about that at all. And you expect a big crowd. I'm sure all schools are invited to that program, and I'm sure it'll be standing room only all along the Riverwalk when that's
the
done.
public will be invited, definitely.
Very good. Very good. I appreciate your time today. I told you we wanted to plug the museums. We sort of did that earlier. Almost all of the museums are free to the public. Occasionally, for a special event, you have a small admission charge, but generally, come
Very
anytime.
affordable, right.
Yeah, very inexpensive. And I want to do a story about your work in your department sometime, if I can do that, Craig. If you
That'd be
allow cameras
fantastic.
in, I'd like to see you teach and what you do sometime. So thank you very much. Thanks for the work you've done. Thanks for the work you've done with the committee. Committee was formed 3 years ago
Yes, it
almost.
was.
So you've given a lot of your own time to that, and your time as well to being dedicated to make this 200th celebration one that we'll always remember. I've enjoyed visiting with both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be sure to pay attention to local television here and the local newspaper too, to all of the events leading up to the celebration and the unveiling of the Minerva statue. We appreciate you watching our program today. Thanks again to Craig and to Bill for being with us. Thank you for watching. Have a great day, and we hope to see you again next time on a special program, something like this.